So the idea that games are getting too expensive to create and budgets continue to balloon, that is making it very difficult to see how this industry can continue on this path, is something that's been discussed at length, right? Like, we've gone over it multiple times and kind of discussed the idea of maybe there being a breaking point at some time. Sean Layton has mentioned the same thing, and I gotta say, the recent leaks that came out of Insomniac and Sony, I think was kind of shocking to people to see just how fast these budgets are going up and really what these companies can do to make the math work, because some of the things that have been revealed, it's a bit concerning about the future of games and where expectations meet reality with these budgets. So we're going to go over that here today. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure that like button, subscribe if you're new to the Small Wave Plus channel. So I can't show you these slides necessarily because it's part of that hack, of course, that happened, the ransomware and these just being stolen. But the information is just so compelling because it's one of the only times we get hard numbers. This industry is so secretive about everything when it comes to budgets, and it's very rare that someone from these companies just goes out there in an interview and says, we spent $50 million to make this game and it worked out for us. Now, sometimes you will get that, where they'll be very transparent. For example, Ninja Theory had an entire series going over how they made Hellblade and how they're able to get it out at about a $10 million budget, and they did like a docu-series on it. It's very, very interesting stuff. But for the most part, it's just shrouded in mystery, and it's like, good luck trying to figure out what we spent on this. Well, with these leaked slides that have gotten out there, we know how much money Sony is spending on the Spider-Man series, as well as some others, like Ratchet and Clank was in there, which is a big one. Wolverine, we have a projected budget on that. And the numbers, as I mentioned, are pretty shocking right now. So, for example, the Spider-Man 2, the one that just came out, $315 million to develop and create that game, put it out there. There's also like licensing fees, of course, that they have to meet for Marvel for using the Spider-Man character. We know that there's a Venom game coming up that also has basically anything that Sony works with Marvel for. There are some very high licensing fees to use. I mean, we're talking, some of the fees around this are more than other companies have spent creating their entire game. Now, the thing that's so interesting about Spider-Man 2's budget at $315 million is that's roughly 3 to 3.5 times more than Spider-Man 2018 cost to make. So you start doing the math and you're like, okay, well, how much higher is Spider-Man 3 going to be? Well, that's expected to cost $385 million. Here's the thing with that. Expectations very rarely work out, as is kind of put down on paper here, by the end of development. And in fact, Spider-Man 2, they were trying to get that out for less than $300 million. I think it was like $280, $290 million. And obviously, it ends up maybe internally getting delayed or other things happening. And it's like, okay, it just cost us an extra $25 to $30 million to get this game out there. That tells me that Spider-Man 3 is probably not getting out for less than $400 million, which has brought up some interesting ideas as to how to recoup that money outside of just selling a ton of copies, which you need to. For example, Spider-Man 2, apparently, they need to sell just over 7 million copies to break even, which is absolutely wild to think about, considering that's a $70 game. So if it was 60, it'd be more than that, clearly. But it makes me wonder about Spider-Man 3. How many did they sell there if it's, say, over a $400 million budget? Well, Sony's been trying to work this out, and one thing that they came up with was to split the game into multiple parts. So you would basically have at minimum, $100 game, because you would have part 1 and part 2, each being $50 each. So, in a sense, they would try to make it feel like the game is cheaper by releasing part 1, obviously, at $50. Like, oh, wow, that's $20 less than I thought it was going to be, because I figured I was getting a $70 game here. Well, then you would get the next part of the game the following year. So it'd only be 1 year apart, right? And in that regard, yes, you would technically spend $100 total. And they also had a multiplayer component that would tack on more money. They'd have to probably work that out. I don't think it'd be the same price, like 20 or 30 bucks or something. And in a way, Sony would be raising the price on their games by quite a bit. I do want to stress, though, as this has been going around as something that almost is set in stone, this appears to just be brainstorming behind the scenes, right? Concepts of them being like, okay, could we do this? What would the return on investment be? Does it make sense? It doesn't necessarily mean that that is happening and that's like the case for Spider-Man 3 and how they're going to release it. The thing that's, to me, the most interesting here is they feel the need to try to figure this out because they also know that budgets for games are skyrocketing. And I mean, really, if you look at the console market, it's not growing as fast as they need it to. In fact, there are a lot of people who look at this, analysts who say the console market is either stagnant or even kind of shrinking a bit because we have so many other avenues of entertainment, especially with phones, tablets. You can even say just streaming games. I mean, that's starting to at least pick up some part of the pie for gaming in general. And when you're going in the opposite direction in terms of the amount of people you can reach, but your budgets keep going up, I mean, something's got to get figured out. Otherwise, yes, you will have a breaking point where expectations that continue to rise just won't be met anymore. And will that become a problem in the future? Well, it's hard to say right now because Sony is looking outside of the PlayStation ecosystem. They're looking to PC, they're looking to mobile, and it makes sense why they are doing all of that after you start to see the numbers behind the scenes. Now, I do want to stress right now, this is specifically for Spider-Man that is a licensed property from Marvel. So we heard that Horizon Forbidden West cost just over $220 million, I believe, to make. Last of Us Part 2, which was in development for quite a while and obviously took a lot to get that game done at that sort of level, that level of quality. That was about the same as Horizon Forbidden West. So I'm thinking that when Naughty Dog comes out with their new intellectual property, might be around that same, maybe $300 million the most. So again, you have inflation that's been going on throughout the development of Spider-Man 2, which I'm sure did play into the idea of them missing their budget and going above that. I mean, it was impossible to control with what was going on, right? And while inflation is starting to level a bit, it's still just more expensive in general, like just to exist right now than it was 4 or 5 years ago. So either prices on games have to go up for these kind of games to release at this quality, or they have to scale things back a bit. And I do believe that that is something that can be done without too much pushback. You know, I look at these games now, visually speaking, I do wonder how much better they can look in terms of the money going into it. Like, do we have to spend another $100 million on a game's development for the diminishing returns that we're seeing now where you're barely noticing a difference? We've already gotten to the point where we're getting 4K for the most part. And yes, character models can still kind of janky at times, but they get the job done. And that's my biggest thing is the mainstream most likely just looks at Spider-Man and goes, oh, that's Spider-Man. I want to play that game. I don't know if they're looking around at how shiny the windows are with the ray trace reflections or anything. They're just having fun swinging through the city. So I do wonder if we get to a point where Sony, you can even say Microsoft, go, you know what? Maybe we can scale this back a bit. And would that be good or bad for gaming? Because there is an argument that you want that continued competition for innovation and really pushing the envelope with this sector, gaming. So it's hard to say, but I mean, we get to a position where one game coming out that does not sell to the level that it needs to could just absolutely sink a studio with these kind of budgets flying around. So let me know what you guys think about this one down below, whether it's the potential strategy for splitting one game into 2 parts, selling it multiple times that adds up to like $100, or the idea of them scaling back. I mean, what do you think is the solve here for the situation of these ballooning budgets? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.